Joining us now, Senator Tom Cotton, who chairs the Senate Intelligence Committee. Welcome back.
Thank you, Shannon. It's good to be here. First off, let me say Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there, especially my mom and Anna, the wife of my wife and the mother of our two boys, Gabriel and Daniel. They're very fortunate to have her as a mom, and I'm lucky to have her as a wife.
They are. She's a very special woman. So our wishes to her as well. So let's start where Steve left off, which is India-Pakistan. We heard the ceasefire, then we heard, reports last night of explosions, of drone attacks. Where do we go from here?
Well, India and Pakistan have had many conflicts in their nearly 80-year modern history. And those conflicts have been magnified in the last 30 years since both of them acquired nuclear weapons. What you saw over the last few days is an example of strong American leadership under President Trump. No country in the world has the kind of relationships and intelligence abilities that we do to give assurances to both India and Pakistan to help them walk back the conflict and get a ceasefire and try to work through their differences. Obviously, there's a lot still to be mediated, especially Pakistan's support or at least toleration for terrorist groups on its territory, but I commend President Trump for once again showing what strong American leadership looks like.
Well, there's a lot of talking going on as well with regard to Ukraine and Russia this weekend. So you had these European leaders get together. Apparently, French President Macron put President Trump on the phone. They were talking with Zelensky about getting this 30-day ceasefire starting tomorrow. Now, Russia has responded that they want to start talks directly starting on Thursday, not agreeing to the ceasefire starting tomorrow. Zelensky says unless there's a ceasefire, there's no starting the talking. So where does that go?
Well, it's hard to have direct talks about any kind of final settlement in the Ukraine war when Russia is still attacking Ukrainian troops in the forward line of troops and shooting missiles and drones at residential apartment buildings and hospitals. That's why President Trump has said he wants to see a ceasefire so you can move directly to talks. Ukraine is ready to implement that ceasefire. European leaders have called upon Vladimir Putin to do the same. What President Trump wants, and I think what America should ask, is for European leaders to be prepared to step up and do exactly what they're asking the United States to do, to impose sanctions on Russia, to stop taking Russian gas, to freeze and ultimately use the hundreds of billions of dollars of Russian assets in their banks to help support Ukraine and then ultimately help rebuild Ukraine. So President Trump is prepared to lead, as he has been, on getting a kind of ceasefire or armistice in the Ukraine war, but we need to make sure that Europe is doing at least as much on their own part that they ask the United States to do.
So on this topic of those negotiations and our role in them, NBC is reporting this weekend that Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, during 3 high-level meetings with Putin, didn't use his own interpreter, instead using an interpreter from the Kremlin. Michael McFaul, former U.S. ambassador to Russia, told them this. He said using the Kremlin's interpreter was, quote, a very bad idea that put Witkoff at a real disadvantage. McFaul went on to say, I speak Russian, have listened to Kremlin interpreters and U.S. interpreters at the same meeting, and the language is never the same. If that reporting is accurate, why would we agree to that?
Well, first, I don't necessarily credit that reporting, but second, Steve Witkoff is a very skilled and capable negotiator. He has the president's total trust, and he's 100% loyal to the president. He's doing what the president has asked to try to get Vladimir Putin to the table with Vladimir Zelensky to get to a ceasefire. So I have confidence that that's what he's doing on the Ukraine dispute, just like I have confidence in what he's doing right now in Oman, negotiating with Iran over its nuclear program.
And I do want to get to Iran, but quickly, one question on China, because obviously while we watch to see what happens with Russia, President Xi there spending time in Moscow this week, and Reuters reported it this way. They say Chinese President Xi Jinping told Russia's Vladimir Putin on Thursday their two countries should be, quote, friends of steel, as they pledge to raise cooperation to a new level and, quote, decisively counter the influence of the United States. Your response?
Well, this goes back years. At the start of the Ukraine war, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin declared an all-weather friendship, and China has been covertly supporting Russia's war in Ukraine through the use of dual-use technology. You have Chinese nationals now fighting, at least with the tacit acquiescence of communist China. We shouldn't be surprised to see 2 anti-American dictators working against American interests. President Trump is clear-eyed about both of them, though.
So let's get to Iran. As you mentioned, we're having talks this weekend led by Mr. Witkoff. Here's what he told Breitbart. He said, we've stated our position. The Iranians cannot have a bomb. They have stated back to us that they don't want one. So we're going to, for the purposes of this discussion, take them at their word that that's actually how they feel. Do you take them at their word?
Well, I think we can go back to Ronald Reagan's dictum of trust but verify. I had a good conversation last week with Steve before he left for Oman. We're going to talk this week once he's back. He's been very clear what President Trump's position is. Iran cannot have the ability to enrich uranium. That's really the critical path to getting a nuclear weapon. So they can't have centrifuges. They can't enrich uranium at all. Because if you enrich to any level, you can ultimately enrich to weapons grade levels. That's the unified position of the American government. That's been our position for many years. And again, that's the example of what strong American leadership looked like. That would be a good, strong deal. Barack Obama's deal allowed them to have centrifuges and a vast nuclear infrastructure to enrich uranium. What you see here is the difference between, on the one hand, President Trump's America First approach, which recognizes the mortal threat that a nuclear Iran poses to the United States, and what you might call the blame America First mindset, which blames America for the tensions we have with Iran, says that, well, a bad deal is better than going to war, and that's our only other choices. That's what Barack Obama used to say. President Trump rejects that mindset. He believes it's possible to get a deal with Iran because of the pressure we've put on them, because of the economic pressure we've put on them, and because, frankly, the Ayatollahs are scared to death of Donald Trump, and they have been for 8 years. That's why they tried to kill him last year on the campaign trail. So we'll see what they say to Steve today and whether or not they're willing to change their tune. But President Trump has been very clear. I mean, he couldn't put it more plainly. He has said Iran can make a good deal and they can live happily without death. Otherwise, there will be bombing.
Will you push for it to be put to a vote in the Senate like a treaty?
If President Trump wants that, I think you could get the votes for it, because the reason that we rejected on a bipartisan basis the Obama deal, even Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader in the Senate, voted against Barack Obama's deal, is that it was a bad, controversial deal. If President Trump wants to put it forward, I'm confident it would be a strong deal that is fully verifiable and enforceable, that prevents Iran from ever getting a path to a nuclear weapon.
All right, Senator Cotton, thank you very much. Always great to have you with us.
Thank you.